And is anyone getting that noise?
Yeah, yes. I'm just going to ask.
Yeah, I have turned all mics and cameras off.
Yeah, there was a mute all button that helped. Now you muted. Yeah, you have to unmute, Kim. Sorry, I muted everyone, so that included us.
Sorry, everybody. Welcome for those that are already here today. We are having just a couple of little technical issues with the settings on our Teams meeting, and we are hoping to resolve those in a second. But we are recording, and I think we're ready to kick off. We've got a jam-packed sort of hour with time, hopefully at the end for questions, comments, and some anything from the audience that you would like to say. It is meant to be interactive, and if I can get any questions along the way, I will try and grab those. Otherwise, at the end, we will do questions. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our special webinar on neurodiversity in the workplace. Today's session is actually part of Neurodiversity Celebration Week, and that's a worldwide initiative that challenges the stereotypes and misconceptions about neurological differences, and it actually aims to transform how we perceive neurodivergent people. So we're looking forward to today's session. Before we kick off, my name is Kim Hamrosi. I am the CEO of the Corporate Mental Health Alliance. Today we are hosting this session, and I am joined by some wonderful people who I'll introduce shortly. Before I kick off, though, however, I'm going to welcome everybody here today. We've got a few more people still entering, but wherever you come from, wherever you may be located in Australia or perhaps even overseas, from all walks of life and cultures. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, paying respect to elders past and present. So as I mentioned, I have four incredible people joining me today. I'm going to quickly just introduce them, and then I'm going to ask them just to say a little bit about themselves and why they are particularly passionate and interested in this topic, either professionally or personally. So we have could we just, if anyone is off mute, could you please just mute your microphones? We're just getting sometimes a couple of noises coming through. So we have Dr. Eleanor Ath-Miller, a consultant psychologist, clinical neuropsychologist and coach at Transitioning Well. Alex McGrath, a diversity and wellbeing lead at the REA group. REA is a wonderful member of ours. Kenny Singh is the director of modern work and cybersecurity partner for Microsoft Asia. Welcome. And we also have Victoria Schiffer, senior engineering manager at MYOB, who we've had the pleasure of speaking with before. So perhaps, Eleanor, I can kick off with you or start with you about just why are you interested in this and why are you part of today's webinar?
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. So as you mentioned, I'm a neuropsychologist with Transitioning Well, and we're a nationwide team of psychologists focused on supporting individuals and teams and leaders and organisations with work-life transitions and some of the, I guess, challenges that come up in work and in life and the intersection of those, focusing on the mental health and wellbeing of everybody. So we began our specialist work looking into how we could support neurodiversity in the workplace according to growing need, which is wonderful. And that's because public and private sector, our organisations are looking for more information, but importantly, there's growing evidence, there's growing voice that's been coming from our neurodivergent people, employees, leaders. And so personally, I'm here presenting on the topic of neurodiversity. I'm not a neurodivergent person myself. However, I have worked in public health for 20 years and worked with many neurodivergent people, but also I have an extensive family of neurodivergent people who I love and care for, and many close friends who have found their neurodivergent identity later in life, which is very common, particularly for women. So that's why I'm here today, and I'm really excited to be part of the group.
Awesome, Eleanor, thank you. And perhaps I can go to you next, Alex.
Sure. So I'm like Kim said, diversity and wellbeing lead at REA Group, and obviously between diversity and wellbeing is an intersection of the different sort of mental health experiences of different groups, in particular neurodivergent people. At REA, I suppose for about a year and a half now, this has been something that we have picked up and run with as we could see a clear opportunity for us to do a better job at creating neuro-inclusive environments and upskilling people to understand and do a better job at supporting neurodivergent people in their teams. So whether it be team capability or people leader capability. And I just am super passionate about this space because, I think everyone has had an experience where something's, made them not feel included or not made sense or not felt right. And I don't like that people experience that. So I'll do anything to try and fix that. And, I know that that's not a unique experience, but I've got a sister with autism and ADHD and, family members and friends. And I know that's not sort of the only driver in this space, but I desire to see a place where everyone can feel included. So that's sort of why I've jumped on this space and gotten really involved in it.
Excellent. Wonderful. And perhaps, Kenny, next we can hear from you.
Thank you, Kim. Look, let me please just start by saying thank you so much for the opportunity. It's a topic that's really top of mind for us at Microsoft. So team, my name is Kenny Singh. I'm the Director for Modern Work and Cybersecurity for the whole of Asia for our partner ecosystem. In my day job, I get a lot of opportunity to talk to customers and partners across the whole of Asia about the spectrum of disabilities, and neurodiversity obviously is a very key top of mind topic for us. I've also had the privilege over the last 2.5, 3 years to lead our global disability employee resource group at Microsoft. And one of the specific tranches of that employee resource group is our community with neurodiversity. I also have, once again, the privilege to lead inclusive hiring that actually spans all forms of diversity for Australia and New Zealand. And look, it's very personal for me as well, because I have a number of family members who are neurodiverse. And me, myself, I have a partial sightedness, so I use a screen reader and magnifier as I interact with my computer and all my devices in a personal and professional context. So great to be here and really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Kenny.
Yeah,
and lastly, Victoria, let me go to you. We've had the pleasure of speaking with you before, and it's been an incredibly insightful conversation. Okay. Have we lost Victoria, or is it just me?
Looks like it, Kim.
Okay. All right, well, we might come back to Victoria. Hopefully she can rectify the issue with her technology at the moment. Always a challenge with the internet on a busy day, so hopefully she'll rejoin us in a moment. But perhaps I can just sort of provide some context for why we're actually talking about this at the moment. And apologies to everybody. I know I've just seen in the chat that the binging, we've actually had an issue at the back end with being able to access our settings. So we are struggling to stop the binging. So I know it's a bit annoying as people enter the lobby, but I apologise again for the couple of technological issues we're having today. Nonetheless, we push on and enjoy a great conversation. So I guess a quick why we started to talk about this. Last year, we did a great session on neurodiversity in the workplace. Obviously, this is coming up more and more. It's not just about the employee themselves. When we talk about neurodiversity in the workplace, we think about leaders, we think about carers, about support people. So these are really important for us to start to talk. I'm just going to put bring Victoria back. Here we go, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I have terrible Wi-Fi and hotspot issues. It's not been pleasant and a bit frustrating. But yeah, I guess I'll do my intro. So thanks everyone for having me. I was really excited when Alex, you reached out for me to join the panel. So my name is Victoria Schiffer. I work at MYOB as Senior Engineering Manager in Security. And I only recently found out that I'm an ADHDer myself, so neurodivergent myself, and I'm also a parent to neurodivergent kids. And the reason why I'm passionate about this, and I guess also why I was invited, is that I have been an advocate for neurodiversity ever since I found out that my daughter is autistic or ADHD. And similar to Alex, I just don't think it's good enough that people feel like they're alone. They have to figure this out themselves. So I've been a massive diversity, equity, inclusion advocate on all levels anyways, even before realizing that neurodiversity is something that I live and have to literally work with as well. And so I'm here to represent the lived experience voice as a neurodivergent leader, parent to neurodivergent kids, and neurodiversity advocate.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and great to have you back online. As I mentioned, as I was just sort of in my introduction now, we were having a conversation before this webinar started about the importance of recognising it's not just the employee or the person that we're talking about, it is the broader people around them. So it is for leaders, it is for carers, it's for support people. It's not just about the person showing up on the day. And so thinking more broadly when we think about neurodivergence or neurodiversity in the workplace, thinking about the external factors that may also be influencing that particular person showing up on that day. Some of the statistics, just very briefly before we dive in, because I really do want to enjoy a really rich conversation with everyone today. I think we're estimating about 1 in 8 people are likely to experience some form of neurodivergence in the workplace. There's about, which I think worldwide translates to about 15 to 20% is what some of the research is showing. More recently, a 2024 ABS report indicated that about 12% of their staff identify as being neurodivergent. So we do have some stats that are coming through. More research obviously is needed around the prevalence and frequency. But it's really quite important because as we're seeing this rise, it's actually crucial for our workplaces to think about how they can understand and meet the needs of these neurodivergent employees to foster, and as we spoke about, in a really inclusive environment. The recent research from Allianz Australia also found that 42% of neurodivergent employees withhold information about their personal situations due to the fear of being perceived poorly by their organisation or their managers. And actually, this is really quite significant when you think about many neurodivergent people may be underemployed. And the statistics have found that the unemployment rate for autistic individuals is 6 times higher than those of neurotypical individuals. So I think that that's really important for us to think about inclusivity, about employment, about making sure that everyone can turn up to a job and be able to do their job in a way that is meaningful. So today's webinar, we have, as I said, 4 wonderful people to talk about the definitions and myths surrounding neurodivergence. We're also going to provide some practical examples of how companies are addressing, supporting and raising an awareness about neurodivergence in the workplace, as well as some tips that you can take away or strategies to develop and nurture a neuro-inclusive environment. And lastly, we're just going to talk a little briefly around, everyone's talking about generative AI, and we have Microsoft on board with Kenny, but he's going to sort of share a couple of ways in which you can practically use some of the tools that are available for many people on Teams or through Microsoft and other generative AI to be able to make it more accessible for people who are neurodivergent. I'm going to stop. So let's get started. Eleanor, I'm going to start with you because at Transition Well, you have been doing a lot of work in this space, educating and coaching companies. So I was going to ask if you could perhaps start with what is neurodivergence or neurodivergence versus neurodiversity, because we see an interchangeability of these terms. So just to educate all of us, I know there might be people who are very educated on the call, but for some of us who may not understand the difference, perhaps you can just take us through that.
Of course. Thanks, Kim. And yeah, it's a great place to start because I think language matters, and we know that in all of our workplaces, what we are looking for here, of course, is individuals have always the voice for how they would like to be described and talked about, and people will of course be more and more supported over time to do that. But we just thought we'd start with a bit of a broad outline of some terminology, because that way we can clarify a couple of terms if there's any confusion. I think broadly, when we're talking about neurodiversity, we're we're talking about brain differences. We're talking about brain differences in the whole range of human development, and that variation in brains is expected. It's normal. So neurodiversity as a whole, now I've got some nerdy, noun and adjective labels in here because it really does help us get to the nitty-gritty of why we're using different terms. Neurodiversity, the whole of our population is described as a neurodiverse population. We have people with a lot of variation in our wiring. So we all have different abilities, we all have different skills, we all have different needs. Neurodiverse as a group describes the variation within the cognitive functioning or the thinking and behavioural functioning of a group of people. So there's not one normal when it comes to neurotype or brain type. There's more common and then there's less common. And this is where we move into describing that we're all different from one another. So that isn't a new idea to anyone, but it's an important place for us to start. So neurodiversity represents all of human minds and brains. Neurodivergence is where we start talking about a group of people whose neurotype or brain type is less common. So that's when we're talking about autistic, dyslexic, dyspraxic people, for example. And to be neurodivergent describes a person who has a neurodivergence. So we're talking here about a less common neurotype, a less common wiring of the brain. So this helps set us up, I think, for the kind of language you'll hear and that you can use. And that when we hear neurotypical, we're describing people in this whole variation of brain types that is more common in our communities, but it's not the only type. And so when you're hearing about neurodivergence, and I will say that there are some additions to this list depending on different areas of the research, but if we look at this very broadly, we're looking at a stereotype that I can address at this point too is that the only form of neurodivergence is being autistic, and that's absolutely not the case. Or to have ADHD, another natural variation in our human brains, dysgraphia or challenges with creating and putting together written information, Tourette syndrome, where there's challenges in regulating movement and vocalizing, dyspraxia, challenges in coordinated movement of the body, dyslexia, a specific challenge in the interpretation and use of written words, and dyscalculia. So that's where we have differences in the way that numbers and mathematical concepts are processed. So this gives you a broad idea if we're talking about neurodivergence, and I'll stop sharing now. There we go.
You're on mute again, Kim.
It's not a good day today. We've not started well, have we? But, pushing on. Just curiously, Eleanor, what do you see as some of the benefits? And I'm going to throw this to everybody else as well. What do you see as some of the benefits of having neurodivergent employees in the workplace based on your, the research and your own experiences of those around?
Absolutely. And look, we are seeing more and more research in this area, which is important. And organisations like the World Economic Forum and Deloitte, if we're going to pick some big names, are doing good work with excellent quality reports and research in the background. But I think so at one level, people are happier and they want to stay and they want to remain in workplaces where the neurodiversity is embraced of the team. But also we know that productivity tends to be enhanced, and that's for a number of reasons. It's often because there are more ideas that are discussed and floated. When there's a culture of acceptability about our different styles of thinking, we also know that there's better problem solving and there's better decision-making processes. So, there's a number of key factors, but I think, ultimately people are happier at work and they want to stay, and that then informs the success of the team over time.
Anyone else, Alex or Kenny, Victoria?
Yeah, to add to that as well, I think that's really the key, is the diversity of thinking, of perspectives, of creativity, of pattern recognition. Like, I think when we think about neurodiversity, we always need to think about any other type of diversity as well, around everyone bringing different strengths to the table, and everyone, whether or not neurodivergent or not, has strengths and has weaknesses. That is the same. So we're just adding a different angle. And some people, they just have different strengths that are due to their neurodivergence. And that if we are able to leverage those, actually improve the teams they're working on, because they may think outside of the box. I came across a really nice quote as part of my research that said, for some ADHDers, they think outside of the box because they don't even see a box. And so if we think about that, that's really good for creativity, for innovation. And a lot of innovators in the past have been neurodivergent in different ways or forms. So there are those benefits. It comes with challenges, and I think that's why it's a DEI topic as well, because it's making sure we enable people and have them be themselves and leverage their strengths and support them with some of the challenges as well.
And I'll add to that. So look, as I was actually alluding to before, at Microsoft, this is a topic that actually has a very high degree of alignment to our mission, right? So our mission being empowering every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more. We think to make this mission real and to execute on this mission, it is absolutely critical that our workforce, the diversity of our workforce, actually represent the customer and partner ecosystem that we serve globally. So sorry, I'm actually just hearing a little bit of an echo of my own voice. It's gone now. It's all good. Yeah, so it's critical to us that our diverse workforce represent the customers and partners we serve. We've had an autism hiring program for the last several years. And what we actually find is that if there are the right accommodations for a specific job role, then we find that sometimes people who have neurodiversity are able to exhibit characteristics which are very, very hard to replicate, right? Hyper focus, very deep work. They say innovation is all about joining the dots. The ability to look at the bigger picture and join all the dots together to come up with truly unique ideas and be very creative and think outside the box. Some of the things that were just discussed over the last few minutes. In our lived experience, we're actually seeing all of that manifest in our engineering teams, in our field teams, in Microsoft globally. Yeah, so look, I'll summarize by basically saying it's something that is core to our mission, and it's the fundamental ethos of our culture at Microsoft.
I'm going to come back to, you just mentioned accommodations, and I think I'd like to talk about that a little bit later, about how companies are supporting. And I think one of the things we think about is accommodation. So I'd like to come back to bring up your point again later, Kenny, a little bit, to sort of delve into that a little bit deeper. But Alex, did you want to add anything before I go on to the next point around neuro-inclusivity and neuro-affirming workplace? So maybe you can kind of lead into that, being the DEI piece as well.
I mean, look, I sort of mirror everything that everyone sort of said about why it's important. I think we're all here because we recognize that it's important. And I think the thing to call out is that even if you don't know who in your business is neurodivergent, those people exist, and probably in higher numbers than you expect, because there's a lot of people who, haven't been diagnosed, aren't interested in being diagnosed, unaware that some of these sort of characteristics of neurodivergence show up for them, and maybe they will one day. Maybe it'll be by having a neurodivergent child that sort of highlights to them that these types of things show up, which is a really common experience. But I think the conversations that I've had with everyone in this group, what we want to try and achieve through neuro-inclusion is designing structures and setups in teams where the behavior is, neuro-inclusive, which is inclusive for everyone, because it's not like you're going after certain people in the team and sort of saying, how can we best support you? Those neuro-inclusive team ways of working are really helpful for everyone. So I think, at REA, I'll go into a little bit of a story about what we've done, but it was sort of late, I think it was December 2022 that we sort of kicked off some of this work. Not to say it hadn't sort of already existed, but we sort of started to really go after it. But it sort of became really clear that there was a great opportunity for us to look at inclusive hiring and how we could evolve our hiring process to give people a greater chance of success, and not just people living with disability or neurodivergence, but all kinds of different circumstances that people might come to an interview with. Like, for example, when I joined REA, I had a 6-month-old baby and I was returning from parental leave. There's unique needs when you're in a situation like that, and an inclusive hiring process enabled me to work around, my setup with a screaming child to be present for an interview, which has obviously worked out nicely for me. But there were opportunities there. So we sort of started to test out what people's experiences were at REA, how they'd experienced our hiring process, how their teams worked together, where there could be opportunities for us to improve some of the things that we were doing, or where there were sort of really big gaps in capability in teams and leadership. And it sort of became really clear to us that we could start to look at disability. And we did do that. We sort of joined up on the Field, which is a disability inclusive hiring platform. And from there, we sort of started a bit of a journey towards how do we kind of mobilize this in-house, in our teams, to create, inclusive teams. And we ended up sort of partnering with Amaze to support them to develop their A+ employment program. And the idea of that was to sort of give us a bit of a roadmap for understanding how we could be more neuro-inclusive. And we just jumped at that. It was such a great sort of moment in time for us to identify that we had the most incredible neurodivergent community at REA, and that they're mobilized and engaged. We've got a Slack group of people who, share and, moderate sort of other people's questions, and, the people are asking questions and sharing ideas and sharing resources and things like that. So we had a really engaged group of people who were ready to be a part of the solution with this. And it was sort of through one of my sort of colleagues who was looking at how we could increase capability in his team, and he and I worked together then on creating a bit of a presentation deck or a bit of a workshop for his team on neuro-inclusive behaviours that sort of went through all the different types of neurodivergence, how they might show up, common misconceptions, some of which Eleanor sort of covered, but what are the stereotypes of autism, what are the stereotypes of ADHD, and how can we kind of reverse some of our thinking and unlearn some of those internalized biases, I suppose, around them. And we sort of got to a place with that presentation deck that sort of became a bit of a workshop where anyone could pick it up and deliver it with their teams. What we really learned, though, was that neurodivergent people really needed to be involved to be able to really make examples quite tangible for people to understand, because there's only so many ways you can say something, but if you sort of showcase how that really shows up and impacts someone in real life, like for example not including agendas on meeting invites, it's not enough for me to just say that's not inclusive. You can go through kind of the list of feelings somebody might feel if they're invited to a meeting with no agenda, and it can cause stress and anxiety and overthinking and under preparation and panic and all these different things when it's such a simple thing to do to add an agenda to a meeting invite. So just as one example of some of the things that we'd covered. We also had someone sort of call out some things in our leadership training programs that maybe weren't so neuro-inclusive. So for example, what does active listening look like? And that was a great opportunity for us to kind of go, well, crap, we didn't cover what listening really looks like for different people. And it's not just eye contact, and it's not just me sort of sitting here front on kind of showing you that I'm listening. It's for some people, it might be, requiring some stimming behaviors. It might be not looking, it might be moving around. And, how can we create teams where it's safe to show up in a way that allows you to be most engaged? So these kind of moments were sort of trickling us along, aside from that, raising awareness by recognising celebration days like Neurodiversity Celebration Week and Autism Awareness Day, and creating a bit of a hub for all of these sort of resources and pieces of information on our intranet, which meant that there was one sort of source of truth about how we want to be showing up at REA. I think the one thing that I'll call out here, which I know that we'll touch on later on, is, there are so many ways that that teams can be more inclusive in so many ways that we can all show up better as you know, colleagues. But there's also some things that some people might need that are accommodations, like Kim was sort of calling out, that Kenny had sort of mentioned. There are some times when HR needs to be involved, and we might need to formalise a flexible working arrangement or an accommodation sort of agreement to make sure that someone's adequately supported, and we can make sure that they're safe and set up for success at work. So we will have a great conversation here today about, you know, all the things that people can do differently, but recognise that there are limits to everyone's capability here, and we are okay to ask for support with things that are beyond our capability.
So it's such a great summary there, Alex, particularly at the end about, you know, it's okay to ask for what you need, no matter where you are within, you know, whether you are neurodivergent or not. It is really part of being an inclusive workplace. Victoria, can I ask you a little bit around being that lived experience lens on some of the things Alex has talked about that they've put in place, but the things that you've experienced or you've suggested in your own workplace coming from a place of lived experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love everything that Alex has talked about and what they've done at REA. That's why I've, you know, happily been following Alex's work and thankfully been in touch with Alex and also her colleagues who have made a big difference at REA and also for the neurodiversity community as a whole. So for me, after my diagnosis, which was end of 2023, so very recent, I knew, because I am an advocate for all things diversity, I knew I'm going to shout it from the rooftops eventually, but I didn't know when. And so at some point I started at least talking to some people in the business, and I'm very open and authentic, and I actually like embracing vulnerability, and I think that's such an important skill for leaders as well, to actually role model that as well. And so I wanted to show up as my true self and started with internal communities. And so in addition to what Alex is saying, and also tangential to that, what we did both at Seek, so I worked at Seek before joining MYOB last year, and we started our own little grassroots community of practices, our own little communities of neurodivergent people initially. So we started with private groups where people felt safe and they could share stories and experiences, and it was just amazing to just see people go like, oh my God, it's a thing. It's not just me. Okay, cool. You do that. Well, I don't do that, but that's so interesting to learn. You know, the example that Alex just gave around eye contact doesn't mean you're listening, right? Necessarily. It may actually mean the opposite, because for some autistic people, for example, it's so stressful that it's actually better for them if they look away or if they're stimming, because then they can actually be present. So lots of learning there. And we did the same also. So we created 2 private little communities. Sorry, Alex, I might have to mute you, or if you can mute yourself. Thank you. We started 2 communities of practice. So one was for neurodivergent staff themselves, and one was for people with neurodivergent kids. Because for myself, I have both. Yay, the good combination. And it's a very different experience as well, because one thing is my own, strengths and challenges with my own neurodivergence. But being a carer, being a working parent to neurodivergent kids, you may be neurotypical, and you still have to support your little ones and really want to make sure that they can thrive in life. And that takes away from your ability sometimes as well to show up at work and have all the energy that you'd love to have. And so that is a whole different challenge in itself. And when we started this little internal community, so it was on Slack, and at MYOB we have it on both Slack and Teams, it actually again gave people an opportunity to just share, to vent, to say, wow, I had like the hardest morning. And just to share that and hear other people say, oh, wow, that's so tough, and I've had the same experience last week, it is so validating. And it actually reduces that pressure and that stress. So, and I think that's that beauty of sense of belonging and sense of being able to show up as your whole self in a safe space, that other people just get you. You're not going to get judged, because judgment for neurodivergent people is really hard. You're trying your best, and then you get all this judgment around, oh yeah, you should just be stricter, like just, push them. And you go like, well, tried all of that, doesn't work. And then what we did from there is then we started engaging with our HR teams and diversity, equity, inclusion colleagues, and they were super excited to support it. And so we then also created open public channels for advocacy and sharing and learning. And so we had 3 channels in the end, and we have the same now at MYOB. So thankfully I had the opportunity to also start the same internal communities at MYOB. Again, with amazing support from my colleagues. And it's just beautiful to see those communities thrive and people share their intelligence and their knowledge. But I'll stop here because otherwise I can keep going.
I'm sure we could keep listening to you too. It's very, very interesting. Eleanor, I want to go back to just a quick question around, we mentioned some of the myths and stereotypes and that are there or that are perceived. Can you tell me a little bit more about sort of that connection to mental health and wellbeing? What are some of the risks or risk factors? Are there any pervasive stereotypes that others have about them that might impact on people's mental health? Because, as Core Mental Health Alliance, it sort of tells you what we do in our title. We do have a big focus on mental health and wellbeing. So I'm really curious to see that. Is there a link and what can we do to be more supportive around the mental health of any of the neurodivergent employees?
Absolutely. It's I guess an interesting place to start here is to say that it is actually a myth and a misconception that to be neurodivergent, it's synonymous with having a mental health condition, that neurodivergence is a form of mental illness, for example. And that's actually not true. It couldn't be further from the truth, because there's not a diagnostic overlay there at all, which is important for everyone to be considering. But what we know in the workplace is that, as the group has been saying this morning, when you're unable to either be your authentic self, bring your whole self to work, that aspect in combination with some environments that are inherently stressful. Now, they're often stressful for every person. So regardless of your neurotype, there are aspects of work that are inherently stressful, but there are aspects of work that are designed for neurotypical people. They're not actually designed with different neurotypes in mind. So what that means then is that we can see increased risk. And it starts in school. It starts before school. It starts in a society that isn't considering the needs of a minority when it comes to the way that we're wired. So that translates all the way through to the workplace. And what that means is that every person in the workplace has a responsibility for being aware of their own needs and what's happening. But our workplaces then have this responsibility to go, well, what actually is causing specific stress in this environment, and what would that look like for a neurodivergent person? The other thing here too is that, remember, you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. And that's why, as we move past some stereotypes and some stigma and bias, it's really important to remember that there aren't blanket solutions here. That's why solutions in a workplace benefit every single person in that workplace. But we do need to be keeping a close eye for neurodivergent individuals, because the nature of the stresses can lead absolutely to anxiety, stress and depression over time, and actually traumatic experiences at work too, with higher rates of trauma-related stress in the neurodivergent community. So I hope that answers your question, but it's absolutely not synonymous, but we need to be very mindful about the environments that we've created in our workplaces.
And can I add to that, because I just love that last statement you made, Eleanor. And I think that's why I'm also so passionate as a leader to and see that HR and leadership gets involved, because in the end we all work with people, and as Alex said earlier, like, everyone has neurodivergent people around them, whether or not the neurodivergent people know it, whether or not you know it as a leader, but it is a thing. And the best we can do is really understand it, so really get knowledge or add to our knowledge, understand it, and figure out how we support them. And as a leader as well, like, people, challenges, issues, they arise. So understanding where do we best coach our people? And if there are some of those traumatic events that happen, how does the environment contribute, and how do we then best support them? And maybe where do traumatic events happen that are actually due to people misunderstanding themselves? And there's a concept called the double empathy problem, where it's always, people just say, oh, well, you don't look people in the eye, you're not listening, you're not sitting still, so you need to fix yourself, right? But why doesn't the rest of the world actually acknowledge and embrace that? Because they clearly have more strategies in place to actually deal with it. So it seems like it's always like a bit, the scales are tipped towards the person that's different needs to fix themselves and adapt, where actually it should be the other way around. And hence, yeah, it's more a call out. I think that the reason why I wanted to jump in to add to that, Eleanor, is a call out to leadership. Take ownership, take responsibility, learn, work with HR, work with your DEI teams, work with your neurodivergent leaders and your neurodivergent team members to really understand and then be the multiplier into the business.
On that point, actually, someone's just posted something here on the chat just around stigma, around progressing your career and being afraid to sort of speak up. How do they get past this sort of stigma that's associated with this, and how do they not miss out on opportunities because there's a perception still that they are different? And you mentioned that, so I'm just curious, you're going to throw that to the group around, how do we break down some of these stigmas? What are some of the practical tips that you might be able to offer those listening on the organisations to just think about? And I know you've already covered a couple of them, but if you had to say there was one really key thing, maybe that might be helpful for others.
I think, oh, sorry, Kenny, I'll let you jump in.
No, you go. I'll go after you. Please.
I think we've still got a long way to go with. We're not there yet as a, set of sort of businesses, communities to understand the best way to help neurodivergent people through those types of career moments. I mean, there's lots of strategies you can apply to support them, but we haven't got kind of the silver bullet yet. What I would say is that a lot of performance management sort of structures and systems aren't set up to allow neurodivergent people to thrive. So the way that we're measuring success isn't always on, outcomes. It's often on behaviors. And if the behaviors aren't aligned to, a more inclusive structure of what good looks like at work, you're setting people up to fail. So I think if you're looking at like a way you can reframe your thinking to support neurodivergent people to be successful, I mean, there's a lot you can do around, being very clear and maintaining consistent sort of cadences of communication around what's working, what's not working, what behaviours would be useful to see for them to progress towards promotion. There's so much that we do that operates in a grey area when it comes to performance, and often neurodivergent people don't feel comfortable in grey areas because it's not clear on what needs to be done. So if you want to support the people in your team to thrive, consistent communication with them around what's going well, what's not, what could be done differently or better, and listening to them on maybe ways you can adjust your expectations and work better together with people. And also have a look at your performance management systems if that's within control and see within your control, and see if there are ways to reframe your measures of success to be more neuro-inclusive. Because I think, in my sort of line of work, there's lots that I can do to be successful in terms of programs of change and whatever else to support people to be more successful in terms of, diversity and inclusion. But also showing up in settings like this is important to my job, but that might not be something that is feasible for someone who might find that, highly overwhelming. So that can't be a measure of success, whether someone's sort of showing up externally if that's not something that's going to be achievable for them. So reframing expectations and just be more collaborative. Sorry, one more thing before I hand over to Kenny. He might have some insights here. You know what? It's completely gone out of my mind. Carry on. Over to you, Kenny.
Thank you. Look, great insights. So I was just going to comment on how we think about it at a systemic level. So what I mean by systemic level is how do we think about it as an organization, that operates in many, many countries, over 100 countries across the globe. So look, I'm going to go back to a term that I think all of us are very familiar with: people, process, and technology. But let me just give you a couple of very tangible examples. So when we look at the people dimension, there are a few very specific measures we have in place. So every single Microsoft employee has to complete a course called Accessibility 101, which has components of neurodiversity built into it. It's broader accessibility, but it actually has a strong focus on neurodiversity. So what we're intending to do through that education process, through that training process, is one, to raise awareness, and second, to basically socialize the etiquette of how you interact with someone who has a neurodiversity, or for that matter, any form of special needs across the board. For example, someone like me who's partially sighted, right? So there's a lot of focus on how you create an inclusive environment as an ally of a person who's neurodiverse or broader in the workplace, right? So that's the training bit there. When we look at our management community, we have two specific levers. We have an inclusive hiring course that every single manager at Microsoft has to complete. And once again, that inclusive hiring course talks about neurodiversity. It actually talks about quite a few different forms of diversity in it. There's extensive training on how you ensure that the hiring process is, how the hiring process is as inclusive as possible, and simultaneously how you're actually making the whole onboarding experience as inclusive as possible as well. And then we actually have these management excellence communities. So these are sessions delivered by managers to other managers. And once again, we actually have neurodiversity and a number of other forms of inclusive workplace as key topics in that arena. So that's the people dimension. And Kim, you were alluding to process before. So at Microsoft, we actually have a special accommodation fund. And I just wanted to double click on this team. I think one of the very interesting lessons we learned over the last several years is that when an accommodation process is not tied to the P&L of your immediate division or your immediate team, that's very liberating for people. So we have a special accommodation fund. For example, if someone wanted noise cancellation or noise canceling headphones, or if they actually wanted some assistance, some human assistance in, let's say, whether it's writing or whether it's comprehension or whatever it actually is, they can basically go through this special accommodation process, and there is no P&L impact to the division or the team that they basically live in. So we've consistently gotten very good feedback that that's been something that's been very liberating for our people. And then finally, I'll also pivot on technology. And if we get a few minutes, I'd actually love to talk to you about how generative AI is helping with this as well. We have tools like Immersive Reader that's baked into Edge and Microsoft Word. You have the dictation capabilities that are baked across the board. And then you actually have Copilot, which is making a very tangible difference to people adjusting the tone of emails, summarizing documents, and a number of other things, which we can talk about in a few minutes. But to summarize, we think about it at a people, process, and technology level. It is as much about culture, it is as much about allyship as it actually is about the right processes in place, and then obviously the technology that augments and ensures that we create a truly inclusive workplace.
Excellent.
And
that's one.
Can I add
Victoria,
to that? Because I also, there's been a couple of conversations around this topic, and Sasha asked specifically also on my view on the stigma question, and how that's going to potentially impact the career progression. It's definitely a very personal decision, and as what Alex,
we're losing Victoria again.
Australia and across the globe. Oh, am I breaking up?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I hope I'll hope my internet will come back. Yeah, so I'm following. In Australia we're actually pretty far ahead. We still got a long way to go. But it is pretty heartening, obviously, that we have those sessions going on. However, revealing your neurodivergence to your colleagues, your manager, the company, HR, it's a very individual choice, and it will come with benefits and downsides. There's no guarantee that you'll feel better about it. There's no guarantee you'll feel worse about it. And I've spoken to other people, you know, at different companies asking the same question. It really depends on your personal circumstances, on your decision, your trust with your leader. Again, call out to all leaders. If you can be that trusted person, you will actually have a better working relationship and actually have better teams. So I would absolutely invite you to learn, be open, be curious, remove your biases. So I think that's also something we need to really work on. We have a lot of unlearning to do as individuals, as leaders, as HR staff and companies, and really try to be supportive. As the neurodivergent person yourself, the best advice I can give you is find your people, find your little communities. I think at the last webinar, Kim, with Transitioning Well as well, I think someone was mentioning that if you find the one person that you can share with, you can be open with, you can be yourself with at work, that might be the biggest starting point for you. And then everything else will start from there. So connect with people, connect with community, whether or not it's at your own workplace or, you know, we've got amazing representation here as well. So follow good people on LinkedIn that inspire you. And yeah, I know that we'll send out some links as well. There's other communities that already exist. One of my former colleagues at Seek and myself, we started a Slack community for people that are neurodivergent or parents of neurodivergent people across Australia and New Zealand. I might share that link as well. And I know that Alex, your colleague at REA, started the Neurodiversity Network. So there are networks. So it doesn't have to be at work. Long story short, find your people, start small, and then build up your own confidence and understand the trade-offs. It's not an easy yes or no answer. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Always happy to chat.
I'll just jump on that, sorry, Kim, before you move on. I think another thing in, you know, this is not coming from lived experience, although there's other things I've sort of disclosed in workplaces, so I know what a difficult conversation can be like. Have a think about what you'd like to get out of disclosing it. Is it community? Is it understanding? Particularly if there's anything that your people leader or HR team or whatever can help you with. I think, you know, as much as we just want people to be more neuro-inclusive, the question you'll be asked is, okay, what can I do to help? And if you've got a bit more clarity in coming into that conversation around what would be helpful, so how you can best communicate with your people leader, you know, different ways that they might be able to provide you with feedback. Is there any flexibility you might need in terms of accommodations? Like, you know, is there a desk in the office that's the best for you? Are there working hours that work best for you? Are there, you know, these types of things? Do you want to wear noise cancelling headphones? If you can come to your people leader with a bit of, you know, clarity around what you need to be successful, that's going to make that conversation a little bit more productive as well than just feeling like you're disclosing something.
On that point about, you know, you've both spoken, all of you have spoken about leadership. You know, when you talk about even Kenny, the people, process, technology, all comes down from leadership, setting up funds, thinking about this differently. Eleanor, I want to go to you around that little piece. You work with a lot of companies. Tell me a little bit about the importance of how can leaders open up channels of communication? How can they be more supportive? And we're talking senior leaders here. I mean, the managers are often the coal face, and you can ask those accommodations, but actually taking a company-wide approach as a leader.
It's a really good question. And I think as I was listening out to everyone speak, actually, this concept of what is a psychologically safe team and organisation look like is one of the key things that we can think about, because I also wanted to validate that for many neurodivergent people, having not disclosed or deciding whether to or not, a pattern that will have been established from childhood is masking or hiding, not just some of the challenges that you might be experiencing, but what you really think and what you really need. Society, you know, doesn't do well in embracing that. So what that means is that you already have a group of people who will find it a lot harder than your neurotypical crowd sometimes to let people know what it is they do need. So it really does go right up the chain to say, are we having really frank, open, vulnerable discussions that our leaders are leading? So are they vulnerable? I love Victoria's point. It's how are they setting the discussions up? How open are our leaders to And this is right to the very top, to hearing feedback, to hearing suggestions. What is working, what's not working, and how is that information? What are the channels that's regularly communicating that from our individual level to the people that are making some of the broader decisions? So the model of psychological safety, I think, and we're all hearing a lot about it, and I know a lot of organisations are doing work here, but that in its essence, I think, makes the biggest difference to how a person is then able to be authentic and give feedback without fear of repercussion. And remember, this is for everybody. It benefits our neurodiverse team. But that's probably where my mind goes to as well in that space.
Thanks so much for that. I'm really conscious we've got 5 minutes left. I did want to take a couple of practical tips away here from today, but I also, we will be sending out, the session is recorded, we'll be sending out a whole lot of resources after this, links to communities, resources, information that you might be interested in. A couple of people have asked about statistics. We can give you references to those that we've used. And I also was going to ask Kenny just quickly, I know Kenny was going to share a couple of slides if we've got time to sort of put them in about actually the practical application with technology, because it is everywhere. And if we can make our lives easier, and I probably think that this could probably work for a lot of other people, but if Kenny could just share with us a little bit about the work that they have done, particularly with people who are neurodiverse, and in ways in which that they have been able to use technology to make their jobs easier, more efficient. And these might be a great start point also for people to have conversations with their managers around the things that they may need in terms of accommodations. So Kenny, over to you for 2 minutes. And I hope, Kenny, could we share these couple of slides, possibly with the big group as well at the end of this? Great, thank you.
Absolutely, we can, totally. So look, very mindful of time, so I'll just very quickly go through this. And team, this is not by any stretch of the imagination a product plug. So these are Copilot slides, but for that matter, I think quite a few other generative AI solutions will probably help you get similar outcomes. So I'll talk about some of the specific use cases here. So first, what you actually see on this slide is Copilot videos. So these are videos recorded on YouTube by employees within Microsoft, where they've actually told their own stories of how they've used Copilot, generative AI, to address some of the key challenges that they actually had in their work environment. So please go check out these videos. We'll share the deck with you. If I then quickly just change gears here. So what you basically see here is some very practical tips on what people can actually do to address some of the challenges in the workplace. So you actually have some very unique scenarios here. So for example, you can actually see the summarizing bit there. So you can basically summarize your Word documents. You can do a very quick reading recap.
Sorry
yes, please.
to interrupt. There's some people that can't see the slides. Would you mind maybe resharing?
Oh.
Sorry, some are saying they can, some are saying they can't.
Okay.
We will share
Okay,
them.
Yes,
sorry.
I think it's, and we will absolutely share the slides. Yes, absolutely. So look, I'll just very quickly double click on a couple of these scenarios here. So you have rewriting, right? One of the very specific things that I actually wanted to call out. So this is really powerful, right? Because you can literally just take a paragraph of text in Word or Outlook, and you can just right click it and you can basically say, just rewrite it. You can even tell it what tone you actually want to rewrite that paragraph or sentence in. If you actually have a long email thread, you can basically get Copilot to summarize all the emails for you. So in a format that's actually very consumable. If you actually want some inspiration in Microsoft Word or any word processing application, for example, let's say even in Outlook, right? You can basically get Copilot to start the email or start the Word document or start the PowerPoint presentation for you and give you lots and lots of ideas on how you can actually make that content more suited to the audience that content is serving. And then there's quite a few other things. For example, inside a Teams meeting itself, you can actually use Copilot to summarize certain things. It now even has a language translation feature. So for example, if I turn on live translation on my Teams here, I can basically hear the entire speaker base talking in Japanese or in Mandarin or whatever language you actually choose. So there's quite a few different languages there. So there's quite a few things that we're seeing practically people use at Microsoft, and the videos will actually tell the individual stories there. Okay, very mindful of time. We just have 1 more minute left. So these are 10 tangible things that everyone can actually try in Copilot today. To ensure that some of the things that were challenging before we use technology as effectively as we possibly can to address those things. So team, my one final thought would actually be, look, we've talked about technology here. Generative AI, we very strongly believe, is going to be a huge factor in leveling the playing field across the globe. But that people and process dimension is equally important. Technology alone is not the solution. This is something that actually has to be influenced at a people level, at a cultural level, and obviously the right processes for the right accommodations. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much, Kenny. Now, I'm conscious we're right on 12 o'clock. Maybe each of you, one key takeaway that you want people to think about, and then we'll wrap up.
I'll go first. I just want people to go and learn about neurodivergence, have a look at the different diagnoses, what they mean, how they might show up, and make sure that, that understanding leads into how you have conversations with people and how you extend empathy to others, particularly if you can sense that someone's having a difficult time at work and this might be something that's showing up for them.
For me, it would be, start community, find communities. So either, start it yourself, find your tribe, or HR leaders, create communities for people to start getting that sense of belonging and realizing there's so many more of you. You are normal, and go be your best.
And look, for me, I think it'll actually be those three themes: the people, process, and technology. Technology is a great leveler. It'll level the playing field, but it's equally important that we actually think about how we create inclusive workplaces from a culture perspective and from the perspective of the right accommodations. So it'll be people, process, and technology for me.
Thank you. And lastly, you, Eleanor.
Yeah, look, I suppose it's that overarching view of what are the individual strengths in your team members, and then what are any of the challenges or needs, and that for everybody, both of those things are key to the success of your team members and how happy your team members feel.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to our wonderful speakers today. I always learn so much from these webinars. I take away so much, and I hope everybody else did. As I mentioned, we've got some resources available. Someone has just said also they've got resources on their site. We'll have a look at that from Microsoft. So we'll put together something for you, send out the recording, as well as those couple of slides from Kenny. But thank you very much for taking the time today, and we hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, team.
Thanks for hosting,
Thank you.
Kim.
Thank you.
Bye.